Hi, this is David Orlofsky. Welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime, wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts, we are certainly excited to have you along for the experience in our special second Sukkos presentation. Last time I mentioned about the fact that the Hoshana that we say on Shabbos seems to be focusing on a lot of issues that are d'Rabbanan. And that was, I wanted to suggest, because since the only reason we're not doing real Hoshanas with our Dalet Minim, even though on the first day of Sukkot it's a mitzvah d'oraisa, is because the Rabbanan were afraid that somebody might come to carry it. And so for that chash d'Rabbanan, because of that concern, so we tell all of Klal Yisrael they can't do the mitzvah. A very strange idea. So I mentioned at the time, if you recall, Rav Moshe Feinstein says, we don't blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah on the first day, and it's such an important thing, because Tkiyah Shofar actually moves HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the Kisei Adin to the Kisei Rachamim, from the throne of judgment to the throne of mercy. So how could you do without it? So he says, Rav Sadia Gaon says, one of the 10 reasons we blow shofar is to remind us of the words of the sages. And by fulfilling the words of the sages, we are in fact doing the mitzvah of shofar. But Dalet Minim on Sukkos, how could we just suspend it? What's the upside there? So the fact of the matter is, I maintain, and I told the story with the Yanai Melech and the Mishnah at the end of Sukkah about Bas Bilga. There seems to be a certain aspect of the Rabbanan. Now, I'll give an example. The Simchas Beis HaShoeva, which again, the Rabbanan have as a halacha Moshe Sinai, it's not written in the Torah. It was very interesting. At the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, it says that only the Hasidim and Anshe Maisa, only the greatest people would dance. And the Gemara describes this one would juggle, this one would, stand on, do a headstand, whatever it was. All kinds of amazing things that these people did. And only the Chachamim, everybody else watched. Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, he had trouble with his feet, but he used to push himself at the Simchas Beis HaShoeva to dance. And they'd say to him, listen, you're old, why are you pushing yourself? And he said, because in the future, when Mashiach comes and we have a Beis HaMikdash, only the greatest tzaddikim will be allowed to dance. Who knows if I'll be allowed to dance? So now that we can dance, let's dance. That's that. Today, of course, we have to do it socially distanced, but yeah. But you see that they weren't dancing in circles. This one was juggling fire torches. This one was doing headstands. So the dancing has a special, but it's only the Chachamim. So I wanted to suggest perhaps, and this is something really for a bigger discussion. We're not going to have time today to go and do justice to this, but there's a Gemara in Shabbos which talks about Chanuka, and it says famous machlekes between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. How do you light the Chanuka menorah? So we know we light it like Beis Hillel. The first day 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, 7, 8. Malam Kodesh Meimam. And says Beis Shammai, no, you write the first day 8, then 7, then 6, then 5, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. The Gemara says, where do you get that from? And Beis Shammai says, from the Parei HaChag, from the bulls that were offered up on Sukkos. Because, as you know, they brought 70 bulls on Sukkos, 7 days. Okay, do the math. 70 divided by 7, bring 10 every day. But that's not what they did. They brought the first day 13, the second day 12, then 11, then 10, then 9, then 8, then 7, in descending order. That's one of the reasons why we say full Hallel every day of Sukkos and we don't during Pesach, because on Pesach, every day you're saying a different, actually you're saying the same korban. You bring the same korban every day except for the first day. Yeah, every day you bring the same korban. Masha Ein came, Sukkot, it's always changing. That's why if you have one of those sidurim where it has the brackets, it's the second day and the third day and the fourth day, and you have to keep doing 2 days. That's in Chuslar. It's in Eretz Yisrael. We don't have to do that. It's a fascinating laning that we do here in Eretz Yisrael. And then you just read what they brought on the third day, and you do that 4 times. No change. Very, very simple halacha to be able to follow of what the laning is, what the Kriyas Torah is on Sukkot. But the Corbanos were brought in a descending order. So it says Beis Shammai, just like the offerings were brought in a descending order, so too we light the candles in a descending order. Now, if I was Beis Hillel, what I would say at that point is, what? Why in the world would you bring the Corbanos of Sukkot and drag it in when we're talking about lighting a menorah? One's a din d'oraisa, one's a din d'rabbanan. What are you making the connection for? But that's not what Beis Hillel says. Beis Hillel says, you're right, but Malam b'kodesh rein maridin, you go up in Kedusha and you don't go down. Otherwise, you're right. I'd learn that from the Parei HaChaim. Whereas I would have said if I was Beis Hillel, what does this got to do with anything? Why are you dragging this in? So it's the Gemara is apparently being there are those who disagree, right? Maybe at some point we'll discuss the other views, but why would you bring in this idea of Sukkot till Chanuka? So it turns out that there are similarities, parallels between Sukkot and Chanuka. They're both 8-day holidays, and they're the only 2 8-day holidays we have. I know there's Sukkot and then there's Shmini Atzeres, but the very fact that you're calling it Yom HaShmini means that it's the 8th day of something. Otherwise, you would just call it Chag Atzeres. The fact that you're calling it Shmini Atzeres means that you recognize on some level that this is the 8th day. There's 8 days. And Chanukah is also 8 days. And all of Sukkot we say full Hallel. And all of Chanukah we say full Hallel. Interesting associations. In my own particular instance, the connection is obvious because it's Chanukah time because of the rain that I finally take down my sukkah. So I guess the connection over there is pretty obvious. But there's another idea, and that's the following. Sukkot comes out on the 15th of Tishrei. 30 days later, the 15th of Cheshvan. 30 days later, the 15th of Kislev. That's 60 days. 10 days later, the 25th of Kislev. So the difference between Sukkot and Chanukah are 70 days. And we bring 70 par on Sukkot. But in descending order. Why? Because the 70 bulls that we bring represent the 70 nations of the world. There's a certain universal aspect to Sukkot. A lot of messianic references. The Gemara says that when Mashiach comes, so the non-Jews are going to ask for a mitzvah, he's going to give them the mitzvah of Sukkah. Sounds like, because when he comes, it's going to be Sukkot. Otherwise, if he comes on Pesach, we'll still tell him build a Sukkah now. Right? So there's a certain messianic idea to Sukkot. The Gemara says, if the nations of the world knew what they lost by destroying the Beis Hamikdash, they would run to rebuild it. We got forgiveness for the whole world. We weren't just looking for us. This is such an important point. I talked about it in one of my first podcasts, but it is such an important point. We're not a religion like every other religion. In Christianity and Islam, if you do not accept Christianity, and by the way, the right sect of Christianity, in the 1300s, there were two popes, one in France and one in Italy, and each one put the other's followers into excommunication. That's a unique Catholic concept, excommunication, not to be confused with the social distancing of shiurim in Judaism. They're both called excommunication, but excommunication in Catholicism means the Pope said you can't go to heaven. That's pretty heavy stuff. So each Pope put the other one followers in. So whoever your Pope was, there was another Pope telling you ain't going into heaven. Yeah. So if you don't follow the right version of Christianity, then you're going to be cast into the fire of hell. Yeah. So too with Islam. That's why it's so important to them that you become part of their religion, and they will use whatever methods they can to urge you to take on the religion of love, as the Spanish Inquisition showed us. You have to torture people, burn them, do whatever you have to do. You do that because we are so worried about your soul. The exact opposite, when a non-Jew comes to a rabbi and says, I want to convert to Judaism, we say, why? What do you want to do that for? You know how hard it is? How it is to keep coaching, how it is to keep Shabbos. You ever hear Pesach? You know how difficult this whole thing is? He says, but I want to go to heaven. No problem. Do the 7, go to heaven. Do the 7 Noahide laws, and you'll go to heaven. So 1 second. You mean you don't have to be a part of your religion to go to heaven? That's right. What kind of religion are you? The only true one, in the sense that God loves everybody in the world. He's not going to cast anybody into the pit of hell. He wants everyone to have a relationship with him. Will Jews have more of a reward? I sure hope so. If I'm doing 613 and you're doing 7, I hope I'm getting more out of it. He says, that's not fair. No. You could choose to become a Jew. You don't have to. I'm not going to force it on you. We don't have to be married. We could just be friends. I actually did hear that quite a bit when I was dating. Everybody liked me, but nobody wanted to marry me. I was too intense. If you can imagine it. I can't imagine, but I used to scare off everybody. A friend of mine said, you don't go to look at holes on the first date. No, that's an exaggeration. I never did that. But I don't know how to make small talk. To this day, I don't know how to make small talk. So I would talk about real serious issues, and then everyone would be like, whoa, why can't you just tell camp stories or like the best challenge you've ever had? This is what people are supposed to talk about on dates, because I don't want to get too intense. Parenthetically, I got an email from an older single who asked if I would speak about shidduchim and dating and those sort of things. Maybe I will. I don't know. Whatever catches my fancy. Since I evidently have the Trump strain of COVID, within 2 days you're totally better. I think it's the French fries. But in any event, so you don't have to become, you want a more intense relationship with God, you can, but you don't have to. So the nations of the world are all there eventually to recognize the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Yeah. Hashem melech al koretz. The day will come when everybody will recognize God. We'll have an advantage because we got there first. There was this one tailor, he says, I can't wait for Tchias HaMesim. He says, why? He says, everyone's going to come back. They'll be naked. They'll all need clothes. I'll have a great business. He says, yeah, but all the tailors will also come back to life. He says, but they won't know the latest styles. So we know the latest styles. We've been doing this already for a few thousand years. We know our way around. So people who suddenly discover God will be like, wow, you guys know about this stuff? You want to clue us in? Yeah. How do you buy wholesale? As Jackie Mason said once, I was thinking about a restaurant. He goes, it's a cash business. He says, someone explain to the Gentiles what a cash business is. But anyway, I digress. But so therefore, all the nations of the world are there to recognize them. But we Jews, we're so easily moved by other people's thinkings, right? Hollywood was captured the essence of what's meant to be an American. Hollywood was all done by Jewish immigrants, the Warner Brothers, yeah, Golden Mayer, yeah, the moguls, they were all Jews. They understood, but they understood what meant an American better. Some of the greatest German philosophers were Jews who captured what it meant to be a German better than anyone else. German Jews were more German than the Germans. Yeah, we were more American than the Americans. We were more Russian than the Russians. Yeah, we get so absorbed. So in Sukkos, we bring the 70 Corbanos for the 70 nations of the world, but it's always decreasing. Because the effect is there for us to harness, but not for it to rule us. The effect has become less and less. Until on Shmini Atzeres, there's just one korban between us and the Kodesh Baruch. So this is ideally what Sukkot is supposed to capture. And so then we go for 70 days. Each one of those days, hopefully, taking what the best is that the nations of the world have to offer us, and then coming back. Hanukkah is called the Festival of Lights. Yeah, we light the menorah. It's something that's very special. It's when the light, we're at the darkest part of the year and the light is slowly coming back into the world. And in that darkest time, that's when we light the menorah. Give us light. And what do we focus on Sukkos? Sukkos is all about water. As I mentioned, we take the water and we pour it in the Mizbeach. It's not written in the Torah. Very strange story in the Torah, as we all know. They travel for 3 days. They come to Mara, and they can't drink the water because it's bitter. And so they put in this bitter stick, and then it becomes sweet. Sham samloi choku mishpat. And there we were given Torah to study, to learn Torah. And it was at that point that Moshe said, every 3 days we're going to read the Torah, because you can't go 3 days without Torah, because Torah is water. So Torah is water. So what's light? What is light? Light is very esoteric. Photon energy. I once heard Dr. Gerald Schroeder explain that it's probably the closest thing that's physical, that's non-physical in the world. Yeah, I'm not going to wander off into the concepts of photon energy, which is definitely outside of my pay scale. I do know about the photon torpedoes that were on the Enterprise. Those were pretty bad. But the idea is that light, yeah. And what is the light? It's olive oil. How do you get olive oil? You squeeze the olives to get the oil out. And that's why the theme of Hanukkah is very much Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's the oral law. It's the teachings of the rabbis. It's the traditions that we have received. All of Hanukkah is D'Rabbanan. And the teachings that are included inside of it is all the power of D'Rabbanan. If you look at Mayim as being at the Torah Sheb'Ksav, and you have to look at the oil as representing the Torah Sheba'al Peh, because it's hidden inside. You have to squeeze it to get it out. whereas the water is part and parcel of creation. There is an integral relationship between the two. Like I say, it's really for another discussion, but I'll give you one source for this. The Ramban at the beginning of Parshas Miketz, where it says Paro was standing by the Yaor. The Ramban says all water, Yaor, which is a river, is the word or in it, because all water has its source in light. Yeah. If light is representing the certain spiritual power, water is representing that Gashmi power. There's something incredibly physical about it because, water has no tzura. Talk Kabbalistic for a moment. There's something called chomer and there's something called tzura. Chomer is raw material. Tzura is the form that it takes. So water has chomer, but it's very little tzura. It moves however you move it. It takes on the shape. You put it in a long, thin tube, it'll be long and thin. You put it in a shallow bowl, it'll be shallow. It takes on the shape that you give it. It's chomer. It's raw material, but it has no tzura. It has no form. Light is all tzura. It's all the form that it takes on. The Maharal, interestingly enough, points out that on a very strange Gemara in Ksubas, where it was after the destruction, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is writing with his students, and he sees this young girl picking the undigested barley corns out from the droppings of the donkeys. Chamor. Yeah. Chomer, chamor, yeah. And it's a pitiful sight. And he says, young lady, who are you? She says, Rabbi, you don't recognize me? You signed my ksuva. I'm the daughter of Naktim Ben Gurion, one of the richest Jews. And this is what she's been reduced to. Now listen to what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says. Ashreichem Yisrael. Happy are you, O Jewish people. Because when you're who you're supposed to be, no one can touch you. But if you lose your way and you don't know who you are, then you're lower than the lowest people in the world. And not only the lowest people in the world, but you're under the animals of the lowest people in the world. So ask the Maharal, Gvuras Hashem, Ashreichem, what is the praise there? He says, because the Jewish people are tzura. We're all form. We're like light. And if we lose our tzura, there's no chomer to fall back on. The lowest people in the world have gashmias to them. They have physicality. The animals, a chamor and chomer, they have something. But we're either the Jewish people or we're nothing. So when all you have is the gashmias, and Sukkos is what? It's all about gashmias. All about gashmias. We bring in our harvest, we bring in our wine, we bring in our oil, we bring in our grains. Our storehouses are full going into the winter, and we're feeling really good. But it's all stuff. I remember seeing a bumper sticker back in the 80s. It says, whoever has the most toys when they die wins. That's an approach. Stuff. We don't have this so much in Israel, but in America you have garage sales. We don't have that here because we don't have garages. But, sometimes they have apartment sales. But what's a garage sale? I take all my stuff and you buy it. You add it to your stuff. And at some point you realize you have too much stuff, so you make a garage sale. Sometimes I'll go back and buy my old stuff. How much stuff do you need? Yeah. People schlep around so much stuff. What do we end up with in the end? These two people were fighting over a field. They went to Reb Chaim Volozhiner to try to decide it. So each one gave their point of view and gave their position. So he says, okay, I've heard from you two, but I haven't heard from the third party. So who's the third party? He says, the ground that you're fighting over, the field. So they both kind of smile and say, okay. So he listens. And he comes up and he said, no, what did the field say? He says, why are they both fighting over me when in the end they're both going to belong to me anyway? What are we fighting about? What is so important to us? So you look at all the stuff, all of the sound and fury and signifying nothing. All the stuff. You need 70 days to remove every negative aspect of that Gashmias. The Parei HaChag go down because we're moving to an ultimate truth. And the ultimate truth is going to be not just what's in the Torah, but the Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's deeper than that. The Moshe Shapiro pointed out, famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. It talks about the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, the men of the Great Assembly, 120 sages and prophets. And the last man standing, was Shimon Tzaddik. And when Alexander the Great was conquering the whole world, in the Greek story, so he comes to Israel, and Shimon Tzaddik puts on his begadim of the Kohen Gadol and goes to surrender. We knew we couldn't fight Alexander the Great. And he gets off his horse and he bows down. Shimon Tzaddik's like, psst, you got it backwards, sweetheart. It's not the way this works. He says, whenever I go off to fight one of my battles, somebody dressed in your clothes would appear to me and tell me what to do. I sense that there's a greatness to you. Alexander the Great controlled the entire world. Wealth, power, everything. Says Ramesh Shapiro, why is it Shimon Tzaddik? Says because we were going through a transition. And that's what the Greek period represented. That's what Hanukkah represented. The last of the Nevi'im died out. There was no more prophecy. You can't be an atheist when there's a prophet. When there's a prophet who can show you this is what God just told me, it's hard to deny God. Avodah Zarah, you look for spirituality in the wrong places, but you can't really deny it. Atheism is a Greek word. A means not, like asymmetry or atypical. Yeah. Theo is, of course, God. Ism is belief in. Atheist is the non-belief in God. That's a Greek idea. Because there was no more Nevuah. Now you only had Chachamim. So it's the first of the Chachamim, with no more Nevi'im around, who confronts Alexander the Great. Why? Because the Greeks held that they had the key to intellect, logic, universities, culture, sports, everything we call Western civilization, everything that surrounds us. And what did we have? We had Torah. Josephus writes, we are not given to the writing of many books because the Torah is our form of entertainment. That's what we find fun in. The Geschmack. This fellow was helping Rav Aaron Kotler raise money for Lakewood Yeshiva. And he comes overnight and he opens the newspaper. Rav Aaron looks at him and says, why don't you open a Gemara? He says, don't worry, Rebbe, I have my Olam Haba. He goes, the Olam Haba? I'm thinking about Olam Hazeh. What could be more fun than learning a piece of Gemara and enjoying it and finding the geschmack in it? A lot of people don't know how to do that. That's the sad part. I knew I had the sukkos of knowing A.B. Rattenberg when he was out in L.A. Sometimes I'd get an invitation over for supper. And he'd sit down and start playing the piano. songs that I didn't recognize. And I said to his wife once, I said, what's he playing? She said, his day. He could just take it and turn it into music. But you have to have a certain mastery of the piano to make that work. If you never move past bum ba da da 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 bum. I used to grow up, there was always somebody at the piano in the library. Bum ba da da bum ba da da bum ba da da bum. You just hope somebody came along who knew the second part. Bum bum bum. They passed a law in New York State that if someone plays that for more than 10 minutes and you kill them, you're not held responsible. But, so, okay, if that's as far as you've mastered the piano, you're not going to find a geschmack that an A.B. Rattenberg sits down and plays the piano and just the most beautiful music comes pouring out. But if you can find that in Torah. So the Greeks came and confronted us with their intellect and their logic. How do you know this? How do you know that? How do you know this? And we were like, I don't know. Okay, let's examine the Torah. Let's squeeze it to find the olive oil. And we found this brilliance. The way I heard Rabbi Shapiro put it was, Adarabba. From your kasha, I have a deeper understanding of Torah than I understood before. I didn't even realize how beautiful this was. You're making me squeeze the olives to get the olive oil out of it to see the brilliance of it. That process starts on Sukkos. That's what's represented by the lower number of offerings you bring every day. Did you go from 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, instead of going 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. We're moving away from the temptations of the physicality that the nations of the world have to offer us. And they're good. Chaim Shmulevitz once said, I couldn't understand when I was in Europe. I couldn't understand Esav. You trade this world for Olam Haba. For what? For a piece of black bread and an onion? Then I came to America and I found Esav wasn't so stupid after all. My parents, who were not easy to impress. Yeah, I still remember when the fanciest kosher restaurant, certainly in New York, which means probably the world, was Luigi Siegel's. And when we were engaged, my parents took us out there, and we were just like, wow, whoever saw anything like this, you know what I mean? Kosher restaurants with delis, with formica tables, and some waiter with an attitude came over with like a dirty rag and wiped off the table, put down a paper napkin and stuck to it, and you got some like bent silverware, you know. And they're like, yeah, what do you want? What do you want? I was thinking, now we're out of it. I don't know if these delis are still around. I used to remember these delis. We were once in one, me and my wife. My wife said, do you have any herbal tea? Yeah. Herb, get these people some tea. You go to Luigi Siegel's. It's like a fancy restaurant. My parents weren't impressed. They weren't impressed. But my mother used to speak about the time that she was in Paris and she stayed in the Ritz Hotel. And just how unbelievable it was. She says they used to put like a little mat down on the carpeting, you know, or a towel, whatever it was. So when you got out of bed, you shouldn't have to touch with your bare feet the carpet, which was the fanciest thing you've ever seen. You know, it's like, you know, yeah, of course you want that, you know. So fancy. Okay, Sukkos. We celebrate the Gashmis, no question about it. But it's decreasing. And that process of decreasing continues until we get to Chanuka. Chanuka is, Herman Wouk wrote a book called This Is My God. And he says in the introduction, it's an introduction to Judaism, and at the time he was quite a popular novelist. And he says he wrote it because people were asking me about Hanukkah. And so I decided to write a book explaining about what Judaism is. And when he comes to Hanukkah, he says, I have to tell you, this is not really one of the major things. You know, it's cold out, might be snowing, you know, dark, and you light these little candles. Little candles. There's none of the, you know, pageantry, he says, that goes with the other holidays. None of the gashmias. There's no mitzvah to have a Suda on Chanukah unless you're doing it as an excuse. There is a minhag to eat foods that are cooked in oil. Ashkenazi Jews tend to have potato latkes. Ashkenazi Jews tend to have like fried bread. But that's mostly because of the minhag to eat things in oil to show that we don't want to have great physiques like the Greeks had. We want to look like Jews. Anyway, but that's not what Hanukkah is about. It's about the light. It's about the brilliance inside of the water of Torah. It's squeezing the olive oil out. So if there is a message of a dirabanan in Sukkos, and that's why, going back to my original question that I asked in the last podcast, you have a mitzvah d'oraisa for Daled Minim that we're supposed to have on the first day of Sukkos. And the rabbis come along and say, that's because Sukkos is about starting that process of moving towards appreciating the deeper secrets of Torah that finally reaches its culmination in the light of Hanukkah, in the darkness that's left in the physical world. So, a few Sukkos thoughts for you. Me'ez Hashem, you should enjoy the Yontif, and that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about the podcast, you can go to RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can comment on the episode. You can send me an email. You can sponsor an episode. Orlofsky, and this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. The Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.